Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we welcome Texas Impact's Executive Director, B. Moorhead, for an important conversation about reproductive health. It's a great conversation, and I know you will all listen to the end. But in case something comes up while you're listening and you don't finish, I want to hit the homework assignment up front. The Texas Medical Board is meeting Thursday, March 21st, and Texas Impact is promoting a sign-on letter to ask them to undertake rulemaking to define the exception to the abortion ban related to the life and health of the mother. In the very short time since we recorded this episode, we've learned that the board will begin initiating rulemaking. And y'all, this is great news and affirms the value of public engagement with our state agencies. It also makes it more important than ever that folks sign the petition, which lays out the key elements of what would make a strong rule that really helps doctors and patients. The board needs to know that Texans support the agency to make a strong, clear rule. This is an important incremental step to improve the lives of Texas women and the medical community. You can find a link at texasimpact.org and in the show notes. B will talk a lot more about that in our conversation, but I wanted to make sure we gave you that note at the top. In other news, the primary election is in the rearview mirror. Josh joined us last week to talk about that, and some very important runoff elections and some school board elections are coming up in May, with a consequential general election quickly approaching in November. Now is the perfect time to begin planning for that. I hope you and your congregation are using Texas Impact's Texas Faith Votes resources on our website. Hit us up if you have questions or need help getting started. You can always catch me at scott@texasimpact.org. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with B. Moorhead. Joining us for today's conversation is Texas Impact's Executive Director, B. Moorhead. B, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Scott.
It has been an incredible start to the year. I feel like I've spent more time with you than my family over the course of the last few weeks. How are you feeling about the beginning of 2024?
Well, it is off to a rollicking start, that's for sure. I feel like, yes, we've gotten to spend a lot of time together, and that has been a joy and a privilege for me. But it is nice to not be going out and doing events every day or two.
Right. It's been even more of a joy seeing so many of you, our listeners, out on the road. You want to say a word about just the incredible energy we felt as we traveled the state throughout the first couple months of 2024, preparing for this election season?
Man, I tell you what, we were on a call, Kat and I were on a call with the United Women in Faith Planning Committee yesterday, and the exact same topic came up. I mean, everyone is so energized, and the thing that we said has been universally surprising and great is we've been going out, and doing these events, and I think we are leaving energized because everyone is so excited to see us, to be there, and I think most importantly to see each other. And that's something that I think we've been talking a lot about in the staff calls and meetings is people clearly have a hunger to be around each other, and that is great. People
do have a hunger to be around each other, and we're going to talk about throughout this year some opportunities to do that. And I promise, as we go throughout this episode, we are going to talk about some things that you can do, some ways that you can engage your communities. But the conversation that we're going to start out with today is much more serious in tone. Because post-Dobbs, there has been a lot of conversation about Texas's abortion laws, particularly the exception to the abortion ban related to the life and health of the mother, because that exception is not well defined in the law. And that lack of clarity has led to legal challenges, including we all saw the news about Kate Cox. That case got national attention last year. And now the larger Zorowski case, which the Texas Supreme Court is currently considering, and we could see a ruling any day now. So B, talk to us about the lawsuits. What exactly is the issue?
So the issue is Texas's abortion ban is very strict. It's very broad. And the penalties for violating it are extremely punitive. If a doctor performs an abortion that doesn't fall within a really narrow exception to the abortion ban, they can go to jail for the rest of their life. They can owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties. And they also, under one of the laws, they could be sued, so they could have both criminal and civil penalties involved. And the exceptions to the abortion ban are really narrow. They are really just about if the mother's life is in danger, and the law goes so far as to say in danger, but not from a mental health reason. So basically, if the mother comes in and says, I'm going to kill myself if I can't have an abortion, that doesn't constitute being in danger, their life being in danger. It has to be that there is some, physical reason that the pregnancy is endangering their life. So the law does create that exception, but it is not well characterized medically in the law. So the legislators clearly intended to create the exception, but they didn't write it necessarily the way doctors would have wanted to see it written. So it's created a lot of confusion, and doctors are saying they don't feel like they can do an abortion even in a case where it's clearly medically indicated, because they can't be confident that after the fact somebody's not going to say, well, it doesn't seem like it was really in danger to me. And that's led to these cases where someone, becomes completely septic. They have a systemic infection. They have a burst fallopian tube, or any of these other horror stories that we're hearing and that are the subject in some cases of these lawsuits, because the doctor didn't feel confident that they could take action until the mother really literally was just about dead.
Given the stakes for both mothers and doctors, this isn't an area of law where you would think there should be a lot of ambiguity, huh?
Exactly. It's very vague. And I think it's this combination of these two things, right? It's very vague, and the punishment is very severe.
Yeah. So what is the fix?
Well, the fix in a broad sense would be to go in and change the legislation in some way. But
tried that last time, right?
Well, they did try it last time, and they made a little bitty change. But we don't have to go into all the reasons why that is
right.
not the most likely, and it's definitely not the fastest way to get relief. But agency rulemaking is another way to approach something like this. So if you think about it, you can think about it this way. Piece of legislation is kind of like an item on a menu. So, for example, you might say, I want to order a piece of cake off the menu. The legislation's the piece of cake. The agency's rules are the recipe. So the rules are the way that we know exactly how to implement the law to get the result that we would describe as legislative intent. So it turns out there's not been a rule made about the abortion ban legislation. So we have this vague legislation with severe penalties attached to it, and there's not been that systematic, writing down of the recipe so that everybody can be sure they would always get the same results.
I think our listeners, at least I hope our listeners, have a decent understanding of what legislative advocacy looks like. We've talked about building relationships with legislators, and we've talked about making telephone calls and visiting district offices and those kinds of things. But we've spent less time talking about advocacy around rulemaking. So what does that look like?
So in general, rulemaking, it could kind of feel like a legislative process if you're a member of the public. A lot of the same terms would apply. You can attend a hearing. You can provide written testimony, or you can provide oral testimony. Usually we refer to it as comments, not testimony, because a rule is something that the agency will vote on, but it's not. And it's going to have the force of law. So if the rule says what it says, but we call them comments, and one of the things that can be different about legislative, one of the things that can be different about agency rulemaking is it can be very collaborative, more so, in my view, in some cases, than legislation. So an agency could say, we're going to make a rule about how to implement this legislation, and we're going to bring together groups of stakeholders and get their perspectives on what if we do it this way, what if we do it that way. We could maybe have a big public meeting and everyone can go around the table and everybody can talk about what they think. If an agency proposes a rule, for sure they publish it in the Texas Register and it is open for public comment for 30 days. So, when we talk about how legislation, lots of times we'll say, the committee substitute was posted in the middle of the night and nobody even saw it until they got to the hearing. Well, that doesn't happen with a rule. With a rule, it's supposed to be everybody sees it and has plenty of time to comment on it. So in that respect, it should be something that the public has at least as much access to as the legislative process. Now, the other side of that is, I don't know any better way to say this. It's super boring. It's most of the time, agency rulemaking is bureaucratic. It is very detail oriented. It's not changing the policy. So if you don't like the law that passed in the first place, if you don't like the abortion ban, you're not likely to like the rule that implements it either. So it takes an amount of understanding of the incremental process of legislation to understand it's better to participate in the rulemaking and make sure that the rule is really clear and that we're all on the same page, even if you don't like the law that is being implemented in the first place.
Yeah, and this is one, especially where incremental progress can make a difference because of that ambiguity that we talked about earlier. And folks have been asking for the last couple of weeks, what can I do? Like, I feel like I need to be doing something right now. And spoiler, we have some homework for you, and we're going to get to it earlier in the program than we often do. On this issue, Texas Impact has a petition for Texans of faith to sign to encourage the Texas Medical Board to go through that rulemaking process. You can find that petition at texasimpact.org, in the show notes, on our social media, all the places. B, talk to us about this petition and why it's so important.
Well, so for an agency to make rules on something, they don't have to have anybody outside the agency come and say we need a rule. But it helps. It helps create a sense of urgency if somebody says, hey, I don't understand this law, we need a rule. In that case, the agency has a deadline. If someone files a petition for rulemaking, the agency has a deadline to respond to it. Now, we are not filing the petition for rulemaking. That was filed in January by some lawyers who filed a formal request with the Texas Medical Board asking them to make a rule implementing the medical exception provision to the abortion ban. What we are doing is amplifying that existing petition for rulemaking. So we have a petition it's a different kind of petition. We would call it a sign-on letter, right? Or a sign-on statement. But this is a petition that anyone can sign that basically says, we agree, you should go ahead and do rulemaking. So if the Texas Medical Board decides to do a rulemaking around this issue, what they'll actually say is we're going to initiate rulemaking in response to the petition for rulemaking that was filed in January. They won't just have a rule right off the bat. Like I said, it'll take a while. But what we think is that by sending them hopefully thousands of signatures of Texans saying, we agree, that they'll say, okay, well, it seems like there's a lot of demand for this rule. That makes sense. We should go ahead and prioritize it.
Best case scenario, where will we be by the time the legislature convenes, and what can we hope for next session on this issue?
Well, first of all, we hope that long before the legislature convenes, the medical board will have made a rule so that doctors will be able to say, I'm not worried I'll go to jail for treating a patient with a difficult pregnancy. That would be the first line best case. There's other stuff too, though. If the medical board goes through a rulemaking process, that's going to provide an opportunity for public comment. It's also going to get more people tuned in, thinking about the issue. Hopefully it'll generate some conversations. Hopefully it'll cause some people to talk to their legislators. And hopefully, again, best case scenario, all of that will create an environment where we can maybe talk about having moderating legislation next session. It's not like anybody thinks that the abortion ban is going to be undone next session, whole cloth, or something like that. But there are other circumstances that other conservative states have in their laws that Texas doesn't have. Other exceptions, rape, incest, severe fetal abnormalities, some things like that, that could be part of a moderating approach to this legislation. We're never going to get there if people don't start having, good faith bipartisan conversations around opportunities for consensus. And I think this rulemaking could open up that opportunity.
I love best case scenarios. And hopefully we've got some folks who are ready and willing to do some work on that. We typically end with shameless plugs, and I was thinking signing the petition would be the shameless plug for today, but you should all do that and invite all your friends to do the same. You have until March 21st, right, to get that first round of those signatures
We'd love it if people get them in by March 20th, just so that we have a solid number to be able to let the medical board know this is how many petition signatures we have.
But the other shameless plug is if you're interested in doing work on this topic, we've got a team for you, right?
Absolutely. We have the Reproductive Policy Action Team. It meets Mondays at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can sign up for it on the team sign-up area of our website.
Excellent. So we'll be looking for those emails to come in with listeners who are signing up for that. B, really appreciate the time today. Any other closing thoughts before we go?
No, thanks for having me.
All right. I appreciate it, friends. We'll talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with B, and I look forward to seeing the signatures roll in on the Texas Medical Board letter. There are a lot of big changes we'll be working on this year, but incremental change through the rulemaking process can make an enormous difference in the lives of Texas women and doctors, so I hope we can count on you to sign and share. And then, I hope you spend time with the Texas Impact civic engagement resources at texasimpact.org. If you have questions or need more information, please reach out. You can always catch me at scott@texasimpact.org. While you're on the website, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. We appreciate all of you. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode, so remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.